And so your purpose is kind of that pilot light that I talk about. So how do we keep that light lit? How do we keep that flame burning? That has to be an intentional set of behaviors, routines, patterns that you put inside your life so that you can keep that fire going over the long term and that you're not beholden to what can feel like a roller coaster of energy and enthusiasm.
This is the Live, Lead, Last podcast.
Welcome to the Live, Lead, Last podcast, where we help you live with intention, lead with conviction, and leave a lasting impact. I'm your host, James Duvall, and today's episode is a timely reminder of why purpose isn't a luxury, it's a necessity for effective leadership. But before we jump into today's conversation, I want to invite you to take the 5-day leadership reset. It's a free guided experience designed to help you slow down, reflect deeply, and reignite your vision. Each day, I'm going to bring you a short, powerful prompt to help clarify your calling, align your habits, and restore your energy. You can get started right now at liveleadlast.com/reset. Now let's talk about something every leader faces: the tension between busyness and purpose. We live in a world that's constantly pushing us to perform, achieve, and stay connected. But many leaders feel more distracted, disoriented, and disconnected than ever. Gallup reports that nearly 70% of professionals say they feel disengaged at work. Add to that the rising levels of anxiety and burnout, and it's no wonder so many are quietly asking, what am I really here for? That's why I'm excited to welcome today's guest. Dr. Jessica Rimmer is the CEO of Solomon Strategic Advisors, a leadership consultancy and partner agency with Giant Worldwide. She works with leaders at organizations like Google, BMW, and the U.S. military to improve team engagement, strategic growth, and workplace energy. Before launching her consultancy, Jessica served in executive leadership in higher education, helping shape culture and elevate team performance. She holds a PhD in higher education leadership from the University of Oklahoma and has spoken across the country on topics like transformational leadership, cultural diversity, and personal growth. But at the heart of her work is a simple yet powerful question: what does it mean to live fully alive? Jessica's new book, The Purpose Formula, Learn to Be Fully Alive, explores a question through a framework that helps people uncover who they are, why they're here, and how to live with clarity and courage. If you've ever felt stuck, misaligned, or unsure of how your personal calling connects to your leadership, this conversation is for you. Let's dive in. Well, Jessica, it's so great to have you on the podcast. Thanks for taking some time today to talk to me about your new book.
I'm super happy to be here, James. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, well, we've got to know each other just a little bit through Giant and some different meetings in that space. And I'm super excited about your book. I read it and I thought it was super practical in this area of purpose. But before we get to your book, I'd love to just get a little backstory on you. Tell our audience a little bit about who you are and how you arrived at this area of entrepreneur, CEO of a company, and author and writer.
Well, I think I'm surprised as anybody that I am an entrepreneur now. I didn't necessarily have that set in my sights, but looking back, just like I encourage people to do when they read the book, there's a lot of clarity that comes from the rearview mirror. Looking back, I've always had a little bit of an entrepreneurial spirit, even as a little kid, and I see it in my kids now. I was always looking for ways to make money and looking for ways to solve problems. And that's really what it takes. You have to have some initiative. You have to have some foresight into how you can help people. And so I think I've always had that spirit about me. But my background really is in higher education. I spent about 15 years working in higher education, and I thought I had arrived. I mean, that was for me a super purposeful work. I worked in Christian higher education, and I thought, man, helping students figure out what they want to be when they grow up, there is nothing better than that, getting people unstuck. So, of course, you can see the seeds that planted for what I'm doing now. But it was in 2018 when I was working with Jeremy Kubicek, who your audience will meet or has already met, that I started getting a sense of what was next for me. So that my background built into taking my executive leadership experience and then helping executive business leaders figure out how to untangle their people problems. And so It really did. It was a story that built on itself, easier to tell by looking back than in the moment. I don't know that I knew exactly where it was going, but I'm super grateful it has led to this spot.
That's awesome. Well, purpose is such a big piece of your story and of what you invest in business leaders and individuals today. So I'd love to hear a little bit about your book, The Purpose Formula. And I did read it. It's highlighted all throughout it. It's a great book. So it's called Purpose Formula, Learn to Be Fully Alive. So before you tell us about the book, talk to us about the idea of being fully alive. What does that mean to you?
Yeah, I mean, I'll try to put it in a really boiled down sense, but you and I are both kind of future-oriented problem solvers. And I remember about 20 years ago when social media started being first on the scene, immediately I was like, ooh, I think that we are going a direction of malaise and almost like antiseptic, distracted living. I'm concerned about the direction we're going. And now I'm young at this point. I'm working with college students. The Facebook was brand new 20 years ago. I mean, we're talking blogs at that point. Yeah. I was like, man, I'm really worried about what's happening. I'm watching people go to sleep, right? Like it was like, I'm watching people, their ambition is dying. Their awareness of others is dying. And I thought, if this trajectory continues, we're going to have some challenges. Now, I'm not a doomsday thinker, but it was like I was watching the people around me and even myself to some degree kind of go to sleep to who they are. So being fully alive to me is being awake, pursuing your potential, and being aware and not being distracted and hitting the snooze button on why we are on the planet.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's really interesting. That ability to see into the, not foretell the future, but, we talk about the ability to kind of be early warning systems and second and third order consequences of decisions. And, I don't know that anybody really thought out like the effects of social media and isolation and relationships. I was actually just reading in Gallup about the trends in young men under the age of 35 and how despondent and depressed and isolated and lonely they feel. And that trend keeps going down. And a lot of that has to do with not being fully alive, right? And being disconnected from really their purpose. So with that in mind, what was the inspiration to actually take your teaching and take your learnings and your own passion and actually put that in book form?
Probably a few different things that, I went to graduate school at the University of Oklahoma, and to shout out to my academic advisor, Dr. Penny Pasquay. I mean, I loved her, and I just kind of sat at her feet and took notes because she was so insightful. And one of the just best practices in our field of student development, higher education, is you don't write about something until you've presented about something. And so I was just kind of following a best practice that Penny Pasquay had taught me. Speak about something, see how it lands before you write about something. Now, I like writing. I've done blogging and that sort of thing. And I think I have something to say from time to time, but I don't necessarily, I watched this message resonate. So I got invited to speak at a conference. It was a Safe and Work conference for women. And I had never had so many people stand and wait to talk to me. And I don't mean that like, wow, look how important I am. I mean, I speak on stages all the time, but I had not had people wait in a line to say, hey, I need to ask you, or I need to tell you, or find me later and say what you said was, and repeat back to me things that had resonated. And so I thought, okay, this message matters to people. So that was the inspiration, was what I saw. And it's still a little bit of a vulnerable thing to go ahead and write a book about something. You're like, is this going to matter? But I was trying to, I guess, spark that flame a little bit bigger. What I saw happen in the audience that I initially spoke to, I thought, let me go ahead and try to work this into something that makes sense, that's coherent, that actually might be able to help people.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it really does help people because, people struggle with really knowing their purpose, and you identify some of those reasons in the book. But why is it that so many people struggle finding in this issue of purpose? Why is it that so many people struggle with knowing their purpose?
I think there's probably a few reasons. Again, this probably goes back to just how I think. Like, there's probably not a reason specifically for every person, but I think one of the reasons is we can think purpose is too grand. Like, okay, if I'm going to live out my purpose, it has to be something dazzling. I need to be famous. I need to be an influencer. So I think one reason that people struggle is we think it's too big. It can be ordinary. I talked about Joseph of Arimathea in the book, right? It can be a really ordinary purpose. The reason that we're on the planet can be daily and tactical and normal. I think that's one reason. I think the other reason is like it is hard and it's a journey. And at least in our society, there is a desire for things to be quick and easy. Even the term purpose formula, it makes it sound like all you got to do is plug in these elements into ChatGPT and then boom, you're going to know your purpose. And there is a journey to finding and discovering why you're on the planet. And that takes work. And I think we have become a little averse to struggle and a little averse to finding things that require more effort than we want them to.
Yeah. It's interesting, this concept of purpose, because I think one of the best-selling books of all time, maybe outside of the Bible, is Rick Warren's book, The Purpose-Driven Life, and it opens up the question is, why am I here, right? Like, why do I exist? And people always want to find the answer to that. And I think you're right that we do want to microwave decisions, microwave discovery. And sometimes it takes life experience to kind of figure out what it is that you're actually wired to do, that God's put you on the earth to do. So let's talk about the purpose formula. I know it's an equation and you can't just put some things in there, but I think it's very helpful, the formula that you put together to help people figure out what their purpose is. So talk to us about the formula and how it plays out.
Well, James, you and I were talking before we got started here. I'm raised the daughter of a preacher. So I think alliteration always just makes sense to me. Yeah. I think I was raised listening to somebody put something in an alliterative form. So the purpose formula is desires, designs, and disappointments. So the book really unpacks, and you read it, so you'll know, but what is purpose and how does it work and why is it critical for human flourishing? I think that's a really important topic for us to think about right now. How do we flourish? How do we help other people flourish? It impacts that purpose is not necessarily for you, but it's something that happens through you for the benefit of other people. And then it ties that concept to human flourishing. We really are meant to be connected to other people. And so then it unpacks, looking at the three elements: desires, what do I want? What brings me joy? What were the early dreams that I had as a kid that maybe were early indicators? Design, what's my personality? How am I made up? What are the things that energize and drain me? And then disappointments. What are the things that in my past or in my present have really just been heartbreaking? And it doesn't have to be an experience you have. It can be something that just for whatever reason breaks your heart. For you, James, it's like human trafficking.
Yeah.
There's something about that. Now, we can say that is objectively reprehensible that children or people are being trafficked, but you and your family, you actually activated your life toward that cause.
Right.
So there was something in that disappointment that broke your heart, and your human heartbreak is kind of a reflection of why you might be on the planet and what you might be here to solve. So those three things are the things that the purpose formula unpacks, and I have questions that might, slow some readers down, but questions for reflection to kind of figure out what those things are uniquely for each of us.
Yeah. The desires and, design, I think makes sense to a lot of people. When I was reading, I was like, oh yeah, I get this. I have these natural desires that God's put in me and things I want to accomplish, or design, my talents, abilities, gifting, and so forth. When I started the chapter on disappointments, I was like, I'm not sure where this is going, because like at first when you hear the word disappointments, you think like personal disappointments or like, struggles or failures and so forth. And I think there's a piece of that, right? But it was very empowering to me personally to kind of go, oh, this helps me understand why my passion in this area is actually it's a disappointment in the world that I'm seeing and actually able to apply my design, apply my desires towards that. So I thought that chapter was really powerful in that sense of helping contextualize why it is that sometimes we're drawn to a certain area, or, people who are very, mission oriented, or want to go to Africa or whatever. There's part of that is purpose driven, right?
Yeah. That's right. Oh, I love hearing that from you, because that's exactly what I hoped for. It's not that your personal experience is going to mean that, now because your parents are divorced, you go into divorce counseling. And it's very disappointing, but that may not be the thing, the injustice in the world, the brokenness in the world that you're kind of here to solve.
Right. Yeah. But there are a lot of people who have used their brokenness to launch them into their ultimate purpose. And, it's,
that's right.
What the enemy meant for evil, God turns for good. Right. And, so in that sense that, like, whether that's, addiction or, failures, brokenness, whatever, that God can use that as part of our design purpose into the world to use our disappointment. So I thought that was really good. The other piece that I think about purpose is this idea that our purpose is unique to us. Like we're the only individuals, like I'm the only James, you're the only Jessica. And so God's purpose for us is unique to us. I mean, there's some universal purposes that we're all part of, but talk to us about sometimes when we misalign or try to live out someone else's expectations versus our own purpose. You talked about flourishing and so forth. And I think, does that sometimes hold us back from flourishing when we're trying to live out expectations of our parents or, friends or whatever?
Yeah. Yeah. So it's a really interesting dance, right? Because you've got to figure out, like, how do you know if you're living out somebody else's purpose versus kind of the purpose that you're on the planet for? So the first thing that I would say is I think like God is the most strategic being that's ever existed, right? Like he can see all the brokenness. He also knows how to feel it and make it whole. I think that's one of those justice questions. People are like, well, if God knows how to do it, why doesn't he do it? And it's like, well, he actually is, he's going to do it. He's going to do it through us. Mm-hmm. And so if we don't recognize that we do have a unique role to play, a unique contribution, we're necessary, right? That's one of those things, like understanding that we are necessary, we're needed on the planet for other people it's a hope anchor away from despair. Mm-hmm. So I think that there's a way that God is strategic that above our ability to completely see and understand. And so when we miss out, it's not that God won't figure out a way to meet the needs of other people. It's that we won't get the joy, what I call participatory joy in the book. We won't get the joy of participating in meeting the needs of the planet. And I think that like a dullness of joy might be one of those indicators. Not being able to access the joy, being perpetually frustrated about a problem that you can't figure out how to solve or you can't figure out how to participate in the answer to. Like that might be an indicator that you need to move towards something different. So I think people who love us and who are not necessarily self-interested can be good guides toward our purpose. But if we don't know what we want and we don't know what we're good at and we don't know, like if we're not doing some level of self-reflection and just kind of, I guess, meditation on who we are and why we're here, we're going, like the default position is to live out somebody else's vision. The default position is to live out somebody else's purpose. And that's not to say like every person needs to go out and start an organization. Right. We're going to help each other. Like we're going to be involved. You know, you're involved in A21. You didn't start that ministry. Right. You have a ministry that then partners together. So we're going to be involved in partnerships. We just want to make sure that when we align with somebody else or even somebody's company, that we're doing it because we have a unique contribution to bring to that cause.
Yeah. Yeah. One of my favorite quotes from Mother Teresa is that you can do some things, I can do some things, but together we can do great things, right? And so like when our purposes align, different purposes align, we can bring greater impact to the world and to society. You know, I think sometimes, you know, for me, when I was trying to, you know, early on when I think about my career, my life, I sometimes identified my purpose with the assignment or the role that I was in. And I think there's sometimes even with family structure that we can get so wrapped up in seasons of life, whether that's, raising young kids or being parents or so forth, that when that season comes to an end, we feel like we've lost purpose or we've lost, our North Star of where we're going. Right. And I know for myself, I had to, and we had this conversation before we started, that I had, I was able to eventually work out that like in everything I do, here's the underlining purpose, right? Of what, yeah. So everything makes sense in my world. How would you coach somebody to separate, identity or purpose from their roles and responsibilities?
Yeah. So I kind of covered that particular idea in the introduction, and I wrote the introduction last, right? Like I wrote the whole book and then I was like, you know what? One more thing. Your purpose is not your identity and your purpose is not your job.
Yeah.
Your purpose is how you do what you do. It's the flavor that you bring to any given relationship, to any given role. So yours, equip and empower people to live lives of significance, right? Like that's your purpose. Mine, bind up broken hearts, set people free. It's how I do what I do. So when I'm walking into Target and I see a checker who I can remember a day I was in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and I'm with my girls and we're walking through Target and I said, hey, how's it going? To the gentleman who's checking us out. And he was like, I was like, well, that's, he's given me an indicator he's not alive. And so I'm just looking for ways to bind him up, like, check out, do you need to be free in some way? Now, I didn't stand there and have an obnoxious conversation with him, but I thought, let me leave a little bit of freedom with him. Let me leave a little bit of encouragement with him because he's not well.
Yeah.
It's how you do what you do, it's how you walk through life. And so how I would coach someone is I would look to see how tied together is their identity to their job. How clear is it that it's, your purpose is above your job.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So can you articulate it? And, if your job is tied together with your productivity or whatever, if your identity is tied together with that, like how do we begin to find your identity apart from who you are? Like, who are you when you're not the vice president? Who are you when you're not the CEO? Who are you? Like, how do you want to show up to people? Now, morbidly, I coach them through let's talk about your obituary. Like, let's think about the end of life. What do you want that obituary to say? Who do you want to be at your funeral? Like, what kind of impact do you want to have left? Usually that impact is a lot more holistic than I want to reach our revenue numbers for 2025.
One of the things that's always frustrated me is knowing I should be supplementing my health, but with so many options out there, who really knows what's actually helpful? But recently I started taking LifePak anti-aging formula supplements by Pharmanex, and I've been really impressed. It's a comprehensive formula that supports everything from cardiovascular and immune health to your antioxidant network and mental performance. I've also paired it with Pharmanex's Age Lock Vitality, which promotes youthful gene expression and supports energy, focus, and even sexual health. As a regular endurance cyclist, I've noticed a real difference in my energy, recovery, and overall performance. And it's becoming part of how I live and lead with purpose. You can check out both products using the link in the show notes. How does that play out in specifically like when you're coaching a business leader or like thinking about an entrepreneur who's maybe stepping in to launch something or, a creator who's creating content? Like how do you overlay this idea of purpose and alignment with, because what we do should be in alignment with our purpose, right? But how do you coach people in that space too?
I probably treat it a little bit more like an underlay and like a puzzle piece, Okay. So yeah, again, it sounds like a formula because that's how I titled the book, but it's a little bit more of a journey and discovery. So it's sitting with that leader and figuring out where they are and why are you doing what you're doing? That's a big one, right? Why are you doing what you're doing? What does success look like in your mind? How do you ensure that you don't get lost in the pursuit of this goal? So it's making sure that aliveness that we talked about, that liveliness, then that stays vibrant and aware, because it's very easy to go through a cycle, especially as a creator, of insight, enthusiasm, activity, burnout. Insight, enthusiasm, activity, burnout. And so having some rhythms and routines that keep you well. This was a conversation I was having with someone this week. Hey, you're doing really well right now. What is going to keep you there? Because you are your most important asset as a business leader.
Yeah.
And so your purpose is kind of that pilot light that I talk about. So how do we keep that light lit? How do we keep that flame burning? That has to be an intentional set of behaviors, routines, patterns that you put inside your life so that you can keep that fire going over the long term and that you're not beholden to what can feel like a roller coaster of energy and enthusiasm.
Yeah, that's amazing. When you're talking about that, my wife, Lisa, and I, we work with married couples, and one of the things that we do is help them find their unique snowflake design purpose for their marriage. Because, if you have two individuals who are uniquely designed with a purpose, when they come together, they become one. So what's that new purpose that God has put their marriage together uniquely to do? And one of the things we always talk about is that your purpose, your why, will fuel your vision, what you're wanting to accomplish in the world. It really, the purpose is the fuel for it. And so that pilot light, I love that it's that true north of like why you're doing what you're doing, and it keeps you energized and keeps you focused on the future. So, well, I love the book. And, if you haven't picked up the book yet, the book's in the show notes. You need to pick it up. Yeah. My wife, Lisa, and I were talking about, she's getting ready to start a group of ladies on confidence and clarity and leadership. And she's actually getting copies of the book to give to each one of the people, because it's been such a powerful tool just to begin to understand purpose and how you apply it to your life and live into the purpose as well. And great connection from just the spiritual aspect of it, biblical aspect of it too, of like purpose isn't something mystical. It's not something out there. It's something that God has given us, right? He's purposed us.
Yeah.
And the other thing I love about what you share about the book is that purpose isn't for us. It's external impact, right? It's not just for us to have a purpose, but it should have impact into the circles of influence in our world, our families and, our communities and so forth. So I want to talk to you a little bit about what you're doing with Solomon Strategic Advisors and just your coaching platform. And you kind of have had a really interesting journey in that, because you went from education, right? Higher education to working with some of the larger companies in the world, right? And coaching and consulting. Can you tell us a little bit about that journey, how that happened?
Sure. Well, it was a little bit of a discovery journey, and I tell a little bit of the story in the book. It's how I recovered my desire was the journey of leaving higher education, which I never thought I would do, to start consulting and coaching. So in 2018, I had 5 different people ask me, what do you want? And they mattered to me, and I couldn't answer the question. And so I went to God in prayer and I said, God, what do I want? In the Psalms, David says, oh God, all my desires lay open before you. My groaning is not hidden from you. I said, God, you know what I want. Anyway, long story short, it was very clear to me I needed to jump out and start doing this work. I didn't have a vision for what success could or would look like. I just was very clear that this was my next step. As I took my next step, I got my very first client in the actual 10 minutes after I quit my job. I got a call with a client, and that was kind of ridiculous grace. That's the sort of thing that's like, that doesn't happen. I can't tell that as like, if you do this, if you take a step of faith, you'll definitely get a call with a client. Like, that's not something that makes any sense at all, but it happened. And so that first client really became a huge supporter and referrer of business. And then in that same year, I started working with Google, and then Google led to Microsoft and led to Dell. And it's just been really a journey of, my approach to it was be faithful with whatever is in front of you. Like, that was my actual mental, physical, spiritual approach, was be faithful, do the work with whatever is in your hand. And I was as astonished as anybody that what came to my hand was the governor's office, was, some of the biggest technology companies in the world, some of the biggest technology companies here locally. Before long, the business was growing and I needed a team. And that was like fish jumping in the boat too. I mean, I had the most amazing previous executives start working with me. And I mean, honestly, it has been a journey of discovery and astonishment for me, just serving and trying to serve really, really well, serving with excellence, and then allowing that work to produce new work. So that maybe is a little bit of a squishy story, but it's the truth about how Solomon Strategic Advisors came to be.
Yeah.
I joined Giant initially as Giant transformed their business model. Then it became necessary for me to start my own brand, my own company. And so that has been really fun. So I think sometimes we think, you have a vision, you have a set of goals and action plans. So then you go and activate those goals and action plans to actualize the vision. And it's like, sort of you kind of sort of do that, but there's a lot of figuring it out as you go that I think happens for many and most entrepreneurs. And it certainly was the case for me.
I'm interested, I think sometimes we hear the words like Google and Dell and Microsoft, and we think these massive companies. Was there ever a sense before you got into it? Because I think what we realize is that people are people, right? Uh-huh. And the same leadership issues and struggles, even this area of purpose, everybody deals with. Doesn't matter what label or title's on the company, right? But was there a sense when you're stepping into it, because it came so quickly, imposter syndrome? Who am I?
Yeah.
How is this happening?
Yes. I remember initially having this sense that oh my gosh, who am I? How did I get in this room? That's not helpful. It's not helpful to walk in that sense of insecurity, but you also can't totally fake it till you make it. So I had to do a little bit. I mean, this is where faith is super important to me. I literally used to sit in the parking lot outside of my first meeting, and I would listen to that Hillsong, I am who you say I am. Mm-hmm. And I would listen to that song and I'd be like, okay, I am the daughter of the Most High King. I can go where he said I can go. I'm going to walk in and I'm going to be a liberator to these people. My job, regardless of who's in front of me, is to bring lives and to, help them find truth. And I remember calling my sister pretty close to after I just started, and I was like, this is crazy. I'm strangely good at this. I don't understand how I'm good at this. It's just I walk in and it's kind of like my spiritual giftedness almost. I can see what's going on. I can say something that helps the person. I can show the tools that we're using. And all of a sudden, we're seeing clarity and movement. And so it was almost God knew I was going to be effective, and he had equipped me beforehand, but I didn't know I was equipped until I started using the gifts he had given me.
Yeah, that's awesome. I'm interested, we have a lot of business leaders and entrepreneurs and that are listening to this episode. And what are some things that you've learned working with those different organizations that maybe are some big mistakes that leaders make when trying to build healthy teams or cultures, or some things that maybe, when you go in, you kind of go, here are 2 or 3 things that you should do immediately to build a healthy team or culture?
I think the things I do differently now than I did even when I was in a, formal organizational role is, I think the importance of building relationships has never been clearer to me. Mm. I am a super, let's get stuff done. When we work together, we're having a good time. I'm so task and goal oriented that I don't naturally index towards, hey, let's get to know each other. Let's get to know one another's story. Now, I love that and I actually care about that. But when it comes to time on task, I'm going to always default to let's get work done. Mm-hmm. And so it's never been more clear to me the importance of just spending time, getting to know, building trust. I mean, I think it's Franklin Covey who talks about, organizations move the speed of trust. Yep. That's the truth. Yep. It's the truth, and you have to do that. And if you're not doing that, and I think a lot of driven leaders are oriented like I am, let's get stuff done. This vision is so compelling. We need to, don't you see what I see? And the meaning that comes from the vision can eclipse the people that are going to help us achieve the vision. Yeah. And it really does require trust and relationships. And if you don't do those 2 things, you're going to turn people over, burn people out, and not understand why you're having the struggle that you're having.
Yeah. I think Covey actually says that when there's high trust, things move faster and are less expensive. And when there's low trust, things move slower and are more expensive. So there is this currency of trust.
It's just the truth.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It is. And so that building relational trust is such an important piece of building healthy culture. So, okay, I have a few last questions for you. I want to turn the corner to you being a female leader. And I know that, I have a good friend who's been on the show, Katie Cole, who's a really strong female leader as well. And I know that there's challenges that come in high levels of leadership as a female leader, and being a creative pioneer, you're pretty driven, pretty strategic. You don't need anybody to put a fire under you to get going. So I'm sure that there's been times that you've been labeled as bossy or, intense, other words that unfortunately females that are strong leaders are labeled. So what would you say to a female leader that maybe is driven, that high level executive leader or, leading a lot of people who's been labeled, unfortunately, the wrong way throughout their life?
So I think a lot of people and a lot of maybe like current algorithm advice would be, you're not intimidating. People are intimidated. And you just need to there's a lot of just who cares? And you shouldn't care what people think. And I think that advice is well-intended and misguided because the reality is people do have an experience on the other side of our intensity that may be wrongly shaped by social expectations, but it's their experience. It's their perception. So there's a gap between our intention and how people experience us. So I think the advice I would give is don't take it personally, but do take it seriously. So it can't be like, oh my gosh, I really am too much, right? That's where you're taking it into your identity. It's like, I am perfectly who God made me to be. And I don't need to dim my light for change, but I do need to figure out how to connect.
That's good. That's good. Yeah. Yeah. It's, I think obviously the work culture and society is coming along, but I still feel like there's those lids that, either male leaders put on female leaders or female leaders put on female leaders, right? When, when there's such a nurturing culture in many females, and when you have a really strong, intense, driven female leader, that can be easy to label. But I think that's great advice. Is what's it like to be on the other side of me? And I'm responsible for managing the perception of, or the reality of how people view me, right? So I think that's such a great input.
I think, Jim, I could say one more thing to those female leaders who might be listening is it has been immensely freeing to me to find other female leaders who are also driven, I have a group of executive women friends. And it is a relief to me. I lead a women's faith and work group here in the city. It's a relief to me that there are other women who love their jobs as much as I do. And it's a relief to them to see me. And so there are people in the world who see the world like you do. And if you'll find them and they don't give toxic, stupid social media advice, if you'll find a couple of peers that you're like, you're like me, that is a true relief. So I would just encourage you to find somebody, one person who is as ambitious as you to be friends with.
That's really good. That's great. Okay. Last question for you. If you could give one piece of advice to leaders who want to live and lead with greater purpose, what would be the one thing that you would want them to lead with today?
Okay. So James, my Uber driver 2 days ago asked me, what do you think the most important characteristic is of a leader?
Okay.
And immediately what popped into mind was, I think it's humility. So I think the advice I would give leaders is embrace humility, because humility is the vehicle for learning. Humility is the vehicle for leading. Humility is the vehicle for trust. And humility doesn't look like shrinking yourself. it looks like rightly understanding your giftedness and understanding how you utilize that as a tool to serve other people.
That's fantastic. Well, Jessica, thank you so much for spending some time on the podcast. This has been really great. And I'd love to have you back again to talk leadership and life and all that you're a part of. But I'm going to put in the show notes all the ways that people can connect with you and Solomon Strategic Advisors and just your world. And I would encourage everybody listening to pick up The Purpose Formula, Learn to Be Fully Alive. It's a great read and it will inspire and encourage you. So thanks, Jessica.
Thank you, James.
Wow, Jessica, thank you so much for being on the podcast. That was such a rich and meaningful conversation. And if you're like me, you're probably still thinking about the reminder, your purpose isn't just what you do, it's how you show up in the world. And if you want to go deeper, I want to encourage you to pick up a copy of Jessica's new book, The Purpose Formula, Learn to Be Fully Alive. It's practical, thought-provoking, and full of insights that will help you lead from a place of authenticity and alignment. You can find the link in the show notes. And if you're ready to realign your leadership with what matters most, don't forget to sign up for the 5-day leadership reset at liveleadlast.com/reset. You can also get our weekly leadership email, Rooted. It's a short, actionable reflection sent right to your inbox every week. Just text GROW, GROW, to 66866 to subscribe. As always, if this episode encouraged or challenged you, take a moment to rate, review, and share the show with someone who needs it. You can also connect with me on Instagram and LinkedIn. I love to hear your takeaways. Until next time, live with intention, lead with purpose, and never settle for anything less than impact that lasts.